His presence is here.
Memories of a beloved father.
He was my best friend. He adored me. I adored him.
A bond Bonnie Cole Willis says will never be broken as she recalls the dad who served his country.
So this is the Purple Heart medal that Daddy received while serving in the U.S. Army.
His family.
He always put others first.
And the Lord.
He was a born-again Christian.
Charles William Cole would walk into his only child's home for the very last time Father's Day 2003.
But I could tell that in looking at his face, I could tell that something was going on. He wasn't quite the daddy that I knew.
When did you know something was wrong?
It was over the 4th of July weekend, and I was trying to get in touch with him. I had called him on his home phone, and he had an answering machine. I just said something like, "Daddy, call me."
3 more days would pass before Cole's sister drove to check on him. She'd pull up to his Coleborough Road residence in Chesterfield July 7th, 2003.
It was a shocking scene.
Where she'd find her brother's lifeless body in a pond behind his home just days before his 80th birthday.
So this is going to be the pond that we responded to where we found the victim's body at.
Lieutenant Brad Connor, Chesterfield Police.
Looked like the body had probably been in the pond for several days. That death was ruled as a drowning by the medical examiner's office.
Did your father know how to swim?
Absolutely.
I mean, did you accept the fact that he drowned?
There's no question in my mind that he couldn't have actually drowned.
Nearly 15 years after her dad's death, Bonnie confirmed her suspicion when she reached out to the Chesterfield Police Department and requested her dad's investigative file under the Freedom of Information Act. This after the case was briefly opened in 2011 at the request of another family member.
What I found was shocking.
Bonnie was provided with around 200 pages of documents from her father's 2003 accidental death investigation. What was the smoking gun?
The smoking gun was a body diagram that showed the front and the back of my father's body.
A diagram that showed multiple lacerations that were explained in her father's original autopsy as having maggot activity and some that corresponded with defects in Cole's shirt, but it states without any evidence of blood. Did they not see that there were cuts or blood on the body?
There was nothing that was overtly obvious initially, and when the body was transported to the medical examiner's office, with them ruling it as a drowning, it kind of tied our hands.
But Bonnie said it didn't take a trained eye to see what she considered to be obvious.
My first thought in looking at it was, oh my God, he was stabbed.
A grieving daughter is convinced her father's been murdered. But is it enough to convince investigators to reopen a decade-and-a-half-old case? Next, the pleas, the pain, and the promises.
I think right now he'd be looking down at me and he'd be saying, "You're doing a good job. You're gonna find out what happened to me."
17 years have been wasted, but what would your response to that be?
The pathological diagnosis of drowning is wrong.
The conclusion Bonnie Willis came to after requesting her father's investigative records after police say 79-year-old Charles Cole accidentally drowned in a pond behind his Chesterfield home July 7th, 2003.
I just looked at it and I said, those are stab wounds.
She says these 2003 autopsy diagrams proved her father's death was no accident. 15 years later, she'd convinced the Chesterfield Police Department and the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner of the same.
I begged them to please find out what happened to my father.
They agreed to reopen his case in December 2018.
The ground, of course, was completely dug up.
So this is the cemetery plot of Mr. Cole here.
And February 6, 2019, Cole's body was exhumed with his only child present.
It was definitely a pivotal moment. I knew that the state ME's office would conduct a thorough examination of his remains. And I prayed that they would come back with a lot more information than we had.
And nearly 16 years after his death, they did.
There are a number of stab wounds that were extreme. Sharp force injury to the neck, stab wound to back, lettered E, back to front and downward. Cause of death, stab wounds to neck and torso. Manner of death, homicide.
Charles William Cole's amended autopsy dated February 7, 2019 would confirm that he had been in fact murdered 3 days before his 80th birthday, stabbed 10 times in the neck, torso, and arm before he was found face down in the water.
This is a homicide and not a drowning. So it's dramatically changed the way that we look into a case.
Speaking of the way things look, Cole's autopsy diagrams, though drawn 16 years apart, don't appear all that different. They mirror one another in multiple areas where he suffered lacerations. It's when you get to the pathological diagnoses that it becomes clear in 2019 the 79-year-old was in fact a victim, and this was not an accident.
There are some things that were misinterpreted, some signs of injuries that were misinterpreted that certainly at that point should have been looked at a little bit closer to be able to get us the results that we have today.
Some people are going to watch this and be very critical of the ME's office and the police department. You know that it just comes with it. Because 17 years have been wasted.
Everybody's human. Everybody makes a mistake. From time to time, mistakes do happen. And fortunately, this has now been caught, this has now been corrected, and we're doing everything in our power to bring justice for the victim's family, just as we would have done, in 2003 had we known the things.
And for this family member,
Love you, Daddy.
her love for her father is as strong as it was 17 years ago.
I am doing everything that I know how to do.
And she's more committed than ever to see to it that justice is served.
What do you think your dad would say to you right now as he's watching all you've done?
Daddy had a nickname for me, and it was Booger. I think right now he'd be looking down at me, and he'd be saying, "You're doing a good job, Booger." You're gonna find out what happened to me.
CBS 6 reached out to the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner that provided the following statement that reads in part, quote, "In this matter, we reviewed the additional information and determined that there was a reason to have the descendant exhumed for further examination by our office. After completion of the examination, it was determined that the cause of death and manner of death should be amended." Meanwhile, the Chesterfield police are treating this like a brand new investigation. They have re-examined evidence and have been re-interviewing witnesses. They are also considering draining the pond on Cole's former property. They are asking anyone with any information on this case to contact Crime Solvers at 804-748-0660. Working for you, Laura French, CBS 6 News.